Alright, chapter 3.2, problem 1. It says use symmetry to graph the quadratic function, which we'll talk about symmetry in just a second, and be sure to label the vertex and axis of symmetry. Okay? Now, the first thing you'll notice, these are in vertex form, which that's great because vertex form essentially gives us the vertex. So if I've got vertex, let's erase that, so vertex is whatever's added or subtracted on the inside, so that's -3, plus 4. And it's -3 because everything inside the parentheses is backwards. Okay? Or a different way of thinking of that is I just took the function, this x plus 3, and I set it equal to 0. So x plus 3 equals 0, so x equals -3. All right. That's actually probably a better way of thinking of it, because if there's a number in front of x, you got to deal with that too. But just take the factor inside, set it equal to 0. That's your x value. The axis of symmetry, AOS. Well, the nice thing about this is you don't necessarily need the -b over 2a for vertex form. You need that for standard form. Okay, that's a standard form thing. So your axis of symmetry is at x equals -3. Right at the x value of your vertex. Remember, the axis of symmetry goes through the vertex. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that real quick. Clean things up so that I don't have to run it over. See how straight of a line I can draw on this. Yay, that's my axis of symmetry. X equals -3. Okay? So there's those two pieces. And then it says use symmetry. Well, here's what they mean by use symmetry. Okay, so -3, 4. Well, if I plot the point -2, if I plot x as -2, let's solve for that real quick. So -2, plug in -2 for x, so -2 plus 3 squared plus 4. Plug in a -2. -2 plus 3 is -1. Squared is +1. Multiply by -2, well that gives me a -2. 1 times -2 is -2. Plus 4 is +2. So if I plug in a -2, I get a +2 for y. And here's what they mean by symmetry. If this is my axis of symmetry, if I went 1 to the right, well, if I went 1 up, I go 1 down, and I have the same y value. If you hadn't noticed that already, if you go 1 to the right, you get the same y value. Go 1 to the left, you get the same y value. Okay? So let's try the next one. -1. So instead of a -2, I plug in a -1. -1 plus 3 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times -2 is -8. Plus the 4 is -4. So if I go 2 to the right and get -4, I go 2 to the left and get -4. And I'm still on the graph, so I'm going to do one more. -1, 0. I love 0. So let's plug in a 0 right here. 0 plus 3 is 3. 3 squared is 9. 9 times -2 is -18. Plus 4 is -16. Alright, so we're off the graph now. So -6 is -16. So we'll plot our points. We got the point -3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. -2, 2, -2, 2, so I'll go there, and I'll go there. And 1, -4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right there, and right there. And that gives me this. Really steep, thin graph. Alright, remember when we said the further a gets away from 0, the skinnier it gets? Well, that's further away from -1, so it gets really, really skinny. And this is your vertex. That's your vertex at -3, 4. Okay? Let's do another one. All right. One observation about this one is because it's being multiplied by 1/2, we know this one's going to be wider. It's between 0 and 1, or between 0 and -1. So it's a decimal, so this is going to be a wider graph than the last one. Okay? So here we go. axis of symmetry, or vertex, is again, set that equal to 0, so x plus 4 equals 0. So x equals negative 4. So your vertex is at negative 4, negative 2. Just grab that back. Which means your axis of symmetry is at x equals negative 4. So almost in the same spot. So x is negative 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. And we know our vertex is at negative 4, negative 2, 1, 2, right there. There, I put it in green, it's not the last one. That's your vertex. Alright? And then it says graph using symmetry. So here we go. Negative 4, negative 2. So let's crawl up to 0. Negative 3. Actually, what I am going to do is, you notice how we're going to be dividing by 2? Alright, so I'm strategically going to use things that I can divide by 2. Okay, so I'm going to steer clear of the odd numbers. So I'm going to go negative 2. Alright, so 1/2 negative 2 plus 4 squared minus 2. So, and if you don't skip 2, that's fine. I'm just trying to get points that are whole numbers and make life easier, but whatever. Negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 divided by 2, which remember multiplying by half is the same thing as dividing by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, minus 2 is 0. So if I go down 2, if I add 2 to it, I subtract 2. So this is negative 6 is 0. Alright, let's try the number 0. So instead of a negative 2, let's put in a 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. 4 squared is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Minus 2 is 6. Alright, and we're going to stop there because you notice how we jumped up to 6 already? The next one's going to be off the graph, so we'll just live with that. So we've got 2, 0, negative 4, 0, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the other side, negative 8, 6, right there. So we graphed it using symmetry. Cool? Cool. Alright, try letter C on your own.